I am the General Alfred Chaona, Zimbabwean student major in international relations at African University, and I welcome you to my video on decolonizing the lens, exposing the realities of coloniality and imperialism through photography and videography. As a fourth year and semester 2 student at African University, I am passionate about using visual storytelling to challenge dominant narratives and amplify marginalized.
Welcome to the Valley of Dreams, where your dreams do come true. Africa University. They only come true if you choose the right degree, an undergraduate in international relations and diplomacy. This degree is taught by the best lecturers that Zimbabwe has to offer, the likes of Dr. Rusero, Dr. Pinduka, and Dr. Dinesa. They're not the only ones though. More. We have absolutely everything to give you. Human resources, marketing, journalism, and my personal favorite, diplomatic endeavors. The degree of international relations does not limit you. You can be absolutely anything you would want to be. And to you, my future ambassador, as the Vice Chancellor of Africa University once said in Matriculation 2024, leadership begins on your knees. Don't forget to pray now.
Modern African state, the fundamental question which has constantly carried out for a response throughout the global south or third world is an epistemic side that experienced the darker side of modernity is that how to detach ex-colonized people from coloniality. It is worth noting that Africa has experienced a slave trade, imperialism, colonialism, apartheid. For instance, in South Africa there was apartheid, and neo-colonialism. And also today we are experimenting with globalization. On decolonial theorems and challenges enduring social, economic, political, and epistemic Eurocentrism that continues to define modernity even beyond the era of a direct colonial definition. Decolonial theories have argued that what Africans must be vigilant against is the trap of anti-abnormalizing, universalizing coloniality as the natural state of the world. Before we get on to more detail of coloniality and imperialism, we have to define the major key terms. So I'll be defining coloniality according to Arnaldo Torres. So coloniality is different from colonialism. Colonialism denotes a political and economic relation in which the sovereignty of a nation or a people rests on the power of another nation, which makes such nation an empire. Coloniality instead refers to the long-standing patterns of power that emerge as a result of colonialism, but that define culture, labor, intersubjective of colonialism. But relations and knowledge production go beyond the strict limits of colonial administration. Thus, coloniality survives colonialism. It is maintained alive in books, in the criteria of academic performance, in cultural patterns, in common sense, in the self-image of people, in aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of our modern experience. In a way, modern subjects will breathe coloniality all the time and every day.
I'm not moved by what I see. I know who I be. I just want my peace, make money, day. I go get everything I need in my own timing. Koni kojami, koni dide. So many people deny. Oluwa don't go sign. Can't believe this my life. Everything come align. They look at me so surprised. Shamadelo don't buy. I know it's hurting your pride. Believe me, I don't mind. Party no they stop when we pop. Yeah, we have plenty spending like it's nothing.
Coloniality is a name for the darker side of modernity that needs to be unmasked because it exists as an embedded logic that enforces control, domination, and exploitation. The disguised in the language of salvation, progress, modernization, and being good for everyone. What distinguishes decoloniality from other existing critical social theories is its locus of indications in its genealogy, which is outside of Europe. Decoloniality can be best understood as a epistemology of future, a repetitive of laboratory epistemology that seeks to dealing from terrain of abstract of universalities. Coloniality is a subject matter of global imperial design that is placed for centuries on it survived the end of direct colonialism. In post-colonialism, it continues to affect the lives of people long after direct colonialism and administrative apartheid have been destroyed. Therefore, it needs to be understood that coloniality is linked to imperialism and colonial matrices of power.
Colonialization and imperialism. The Industrial Revolution in Europe ushered in an era of machine-made goods and scope for markets. In order that the never-ending demand for raw materials and also markets where these goods could be sold at cheap prices, the European countries started their quest for territorial expansion. Over a period of time, this turned out to be a competition as to who could colonialize and govern better. The voyages of discovery undertaken at this time also propelled the need to occupy territory which had huge natural resources waiting to be exploited. The bonus was cheap labor also available. This was the background with which imperialism started. What does imperialism mean? Imperialism is when a mother country takes over a smaller nation or colony for political, social, and/or economic reasons. Imperialism can be broadly divided into two phases, namely Old Imperialism and New Imperialism. Basically, there was not much difference between the two, but the policy of acquiring control was slightly different. In the initial phase of imperialism, the European countries found new trade routes and established factories in the places they had trade with. Slowly, on the pretext of safeguarding these factories, they built fortresses and also gained power with the local leaders. By dividing the kings amongst themselves, they took over the territory for rule and soon became masters. This policy they adopted in North and South America, Far East, Asia, and Africa. They exploited the raw materials and cheap labor available and took it for the thriving industries. The finished goods were again sent to the colonies, as they were called, and sold there at exorbitant prices, thus ruining the local industries. In the age of new imperialism, they established vast empires and set up administrative units for the benefit of the mother nation. This was motivated by the economic needs of the Second Industrial Revolution that had taken place in Europe during this period, and had created drastic changes in many industries, and raw material for feeding the new demand became necessary. What were the efforts of this policy of colonial expansion? It had both positive and negative effects. The positive effects were new modes of transportation and communication, hitherto in the colonies, now became a reality. Good governance based on the rule of law came into existence. Setting up of judicial system also was a benefit for the colonies. On the flip side, these colonies were exploited thoroughly and caused a drain of wealth from the poorer nations. Probably the worst effect of
Decoloniality. Decoloniality is born out of a realization that occurs in an unequal world order that is sustained not only by colonial matrices of power, but also by procedures of teachings and epistemologies of equilibrium that continue to produce alienated Africa who are socialized into hating the Africa and produce them and liking the Europe and America that rejects them. So schools, colleges, churches, and universities in Africa are sites for reproduction of coloniality. We so far do not have African university. We have universities in Africa. They continue to poison African minds with research methodologies and indicates knowledge of equilibrium. These are the knowledge that do not question methodologies as well as the present asymmetric world order. In decoloniality, research methods and research methodologies are never accepted, but as neutral, they are unmasked as technologies of subjugation, if not surveillance tools that prevent the emergence of another thinking, another logic, in another worldview. Research methodologies are tools of gatekeeping. The journey of alienation starts with what is normalized in Africa, characterized by various practices. African children and the youth begin a journey of alienation from their African context the very moment they step into school, church, and university's door.
A culturally rich and diverse campus. State-of-the-art teaching technologies and facilities. Cutting-edge academic programs that are transformative, stimulating, innovative, and prepare you to leave your mark on Africa and beyond. Africa University offers you this and so much more. We are a private Pan-African United Methodist Church related institution that is a hub of student-centered learning and a truly international campus experience. We are accepting applications from dynamic, driven, and passionate students from all over Africa for our August 2024 intake for undergraduate and graduate degrees. For more information on our programs on offer and how to apply, please visit our website at www.africau.edu or send an email to studentrecruitment@africau.edu or call us on +263 712 609 487. Africa University, investing in Africa's future.
They begin the painful path of learning to hate their ancestors as demons. They begin to thought that all the knowledge they possessed before coming to school was nothing but folk knowledge is barbarism and suspicion that must be quickly be forgotten. They begin to be told that speaking mother's tongue is a sign of being primitive. In some schools, direct punishment were inflicted on those who spoke mother tongue within schools' premises. Preachers, teachers, lecturers in these universities produced by colonial constructed institutions exist as lost children of coloniality. Modern African thought was now based in decoloniality. So we have about three concepts of decoloniality. So decoloniality is premised on three concepts. The first concept is that of coloniality of power. So when you are talking of coloniality of power, it helps to investigate how the current global political was constructed and constituted in the asymmetric and modern power structure. It delves deeper into how the world was fabricated into zone of being and zone of non-being, maintained by invisible divisions. What needs to be understood is how modernity deposited into fruits of progress. Civilization, modernization, and development to the Euro-American world zone being, while at the same time imposing the slave trade, imperialism, colonialism, and apartheid into the modern non-Euro-American world, the zone of non-being. The second concept under the three concepts of coloniality. So the second concept is that the coloniality of knowledge. So when you are talking about coloniality of knowledge, this focuses on teasing out epistemologies, issues, politics of knowledge, generation, as well as questions: who generates which knowledge and for what purpose. African studies frequently neglect to conduct serious investigations into the origins of discipline, into epistemologies, into how knowledge has been used to assist the imperialism and colonialism, and into how knowledge has remained Euro-Americanism. Indigenous and knowledge have been pushed to the margins of society. Africa is today saddled with irrelevant knowledge that dispowers rather than empowers individuals and communities. The third concept, the last one, isn't it? The last one concept is that coloniality of being. So when you're talking about coloniality of being, the issue here is the passionate question of how witness gained ontology density for above blackness, as well as how the nations of I think, therefore I am muted into I conquer, therefore I am, and its production of colonizer and colonized. Articulation of subjective and being. Now the major question is why decoloniality? Why decoloniality? Right. Now we are focusing on why decoloniality. There is no real post-colonial. Some they call it not yet Uhuru. Yeah. So one of the most powerful myths of the 20th century was the notion that
the decolonization of Africa. We all know that Africa was once controlled by European nations, but how did decolonization happen? In this video, we'll explore the process of decolonization in Africa and the reasons behind it. European colonization of Africa began with the establishment of colonies in uninhabited areas and coastal forts for trade. However, Europeans couldn't go deeper into Africa due to technological limitations and a lack of profitable resources. But as Europe industrialized, they gained the means to conquer Africa with advanced weapons, steamboats, and trains. European nations had three main reasons for colonizing Africa. First, they wanted to control trade routes and establish ports for faster shipping. Second, they sought raw materials like copper and cotton to fuel their factories. Lastly, they aimed to sell manufactured goods to Africans, expanding their customer base and profits. To avoid conflicts over African resources, European leaders held the Berlin Conference to divide Africa among themselves. Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Great Britain attended the conference. They conquered Africa piece by piece through wars, voluntary alliances, and debt traps. Once colonized, Africans had to pay taxes in the currency of their European overlords. They earned European currency by working for European companies or selling crops. Europeans exploited Africa's resources, setting up mines, plantations, and infrastructure, but very little was spent on improving the lives of Africans. Not all African countries gained independence by kicking out the Europeans. Liberia was established by the USA for free African Americans, South Africa negotiated for independence, and Egypt declared independence from the Ottoman Empire. WW2 played a crucial role in African decolonization. The colonial powers, financially drained from the war, couldn't maintain control over their colonies. The USA and USSR pressured Britain and France to grant independence to Italian colonies, reducing Western Europe's power. The Cold War between the USA and USSR also fueled decolonization. The two superpowers funded independence movements to gain influence in Africa. African nationalism, with its focus on freedom and independence, led to protests, rebellions, and political movements. The Gold Coast, under British rule, became a prime example of African demands for independence. Despite British attempts to show the benefits of colonial rule, an African nationalist party emerged, demanding self-government. Kwame Nkrumah, the leader of the party, won the elections and pushed for independence. In 1957, the Gold Coast became Ghana, the first African government run by ethnically black Africans. French Algeria, considered part of France, faced resistance from native Algerians who were treated as second-class citizens. France's fear of independence movements led to a policy of promoting pro-French Africans into positions of power. Decolonization in Africa was driven by a combination of factors, including technological advancements, the desire for independence, and the influence of the Cold War. African nations fought for their freedom and independence, leading to the end of European colonial rule.
Why decoloniality? There is no real post-colonial, not yet Uhuru. One of the most powerful myths of the 20th century was the notion that the elimination of colonial administration amounted to the decolonization of the world. This led to the myth of post-colonial world, the heterogeneous and multiple global structures put in place over a period of 450 years did not evaporate with the judicial political decolonization of the periphery over the past 50 years. This therefore calls for the decoloniality, which announces the broad decolonial term that involves the task of the very decolonization of knowledge, power, and being, including institutions such as these universities. By decoloniality, it is meant that there is a dismantling of relations of power and concepts of knowledge that foment the reproduction of racial, gender, and geopolitical hierarchies that came into being or found new and more powerful forms of expression in the modern colonial world. As long as coloniality exists and as long African ontology is doubted and ridiculed, decoloniality in its various forms will continue to reverberate and be repeated over and over again in nationalist and Marxist. Decoloniality point of departure is existential realities of suffering, oppression, repression, domination, and exclusion. Decoloniality facilitates the unmasking of racism as a global problem, as well as demonstrating how knowledge, including science, was used to justify colonialism. It is maintained alive in books, in the criteria of academic performance, in cultural patterns, in common sense, in the self-image of people, in aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of our modern experiences. In a way, as modern subjects, we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. Thank you.